As painful as it might be to hear, if Kirby Moore leaves after this season, it's probably a great thing for the Tigers. I'll explain why coming up right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso, and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. Of course, football is officially almost here for the Tigers on Thursday. Missouri officially releases its depth chart. I have some thoughts on that, and I really believe that some better value is needed for Missouri basketball season tickets in the future. I want to explain that coming up here later in the show. First, I want to start off by telling you that Ultimate College Football HC is a brand new mobile game that is completely free, has no ads, and 100% playable offline. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Begin your coaching legacy today. And speaking of beginning your coaching legacy, I think there's a decent chance after this season Kirby Moore begins his head coaching legacy somewhere else. And that's the key. I don't think Kirby Moore is going to be going anywhere else as an offensive coordinator after 2024. I don't think he's going to be pulling a Blake Baker. Maybe I'm wrong. I just don't see a dream job out there like LSU for Kirby Moore that is obvious that he would jump at. Now, you'd have to ask Kirby himself. I'm trying to read his mind here a little bit. But based on just reading the tea leaves with Moore a little bit, he seems like a young man who is more interested in making his next step be possibly as a head coach, maybe even somewhere like Fresno State, where he was formerly that program's offensive coordinator. But here's the counterintuitive point that I'm trying to make, and that's that if Kirby Moore, again, a young man, relatively young man in his 30s, has a lot of aspirations of moving up the ladder, I don't think being Missouri's offensive coordinator is his dream job. I'm not really sure what Kirby Moore's dream job is, but I think his ambitions go beyond Columbia. I really do. And there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. In fact, the reason I think this is a good thing is because while it's counterintuitive to sort of hope that somebody you hired and somebody who has been really good for you moves on to another job, well, that tells you that you've done your job if you're Eli Drinkwitz. Heck, I can relate a small story from my life just for a little bit. Not to brag here, folks, but back in my teenage days, I was a pretty good minimum wage cart boy out at Eagle Knoll Golf Club back in the day. But after a couple years, I decided it was time to move on to bigger and better opportunities. Came up to my boss and said, "Hey, boss, can I talk to you for a second?" And he immediately goes, "Oh, no, you're going to quit, aren't you?" So obviously he was bummed out that I was leaving. That made me feel pretty good, honestly, as a young guy who had put in a couple years on the job there. So even though Mark, or Jigglypuff, as we called Mark behind his back in the day, even though Mark was upset that I was leaving, obviously he knew that he originally made a great decision by hiring me, I should say. That's what I took from that particular anecdote. But I think that's what Eli Drinkwitz is going to have to take when Kirby Moore, whether it's after this year or not, when he moves on to a different job, I think he can say, wow, I did an excellent job of hiring Kirby Moore, and it'll inform his decisions in the future about what types of assistants and coordinators he wants to hire. And not only do I think, obviously, Moore has an opportunity here in a real high-profile season for the Tigers to make his mark once again. Also, if you look at the timing of everything, if indeed Missouri has a really good offense, a really good season this year to the point where Moore can capitalize potentially on a new position, Well, if I'm him, I'm thinking, in 2025, this Missouri offense, is going to look a heck of a lot different. A new quarterback, certainly. Maybe it's Drew Pine, maybe it's Sam Horn, maybe it's a portal guy. Heck, maybe even it's true freshman Matt Zollers. Anything is possible. Certainly, the starting 3 receivers listed on the depth chart right now: Theo Weiss, Luther Burden, Mookie Cooper. You got 2 seniors and a guy in Luther Burden who is almost certain to skip his senior year and go to the NFL draft this offseason. So a whole bunch of turnover offensively tells me that this offseason is probably going to be a perfect opportunity for Kirby Moore professionally to move on to another opportunity. And again, if he does that, you got to be happy for him, especially if it's at a head coach opportunity. For some reason, I just get the feeling it's not going to be as another offensive coordinator. I think if Moore leaves for somewhere else, it's going to be a head coach. Now, the Tigers have released their official depth chart for the Murray State game. And as others on the Missouri beat have noted, this is really more of a list of guys who will likely play on Thursday, more than an actual hard and fast depth chart at this point. Now, some of these designations do give us some hints. For example, I do believe at cornerback where it says Toriano Pride or Nick Deloach at one spot, well, that's something I actually believe. I think Pride will probably start, and Deloach will probably get a lot of snaps one way or the other. But many others, especially at linebacker, well, you got to take them with a pretty big grain of salt. For example, at linebacker, the second string guys are all true freshmen. And the first string guys, well, these are the guys who are actually going to play. It says Chuck Hicks or Corey Flagg Jr., Tristan Newsom or Khalil Jacobs. That's all. Those are the 2 first string spots. I think in reality, those 4 veterans are your rotation at linebacker for this season. But you've got 4 true freshmen listed in the second string there: Jeremiah Beasley or Brian Huff, Brayshawn Littlejohn or Nicholas Rodriguez. Those 4 true freshmen, I don't see any of them playing a real role on the Missouri defense this season, more than likely. But what that tells me is you'll probably see them get in on special teams, certainly in the Murray State game, and maybe here or there at the early part of this season. But those are guys that you expect to be out there, possibly at some point. Again, all 4 of those guys, I'd say 3 out of 4 at the very, very least, I still expect to keep their red shirts. And for the millionth time, you can play in up to 4 games these days and still preserve your red shirt status as a freshman, or as anyone else for that matter who has not taken a red shirt. So to me, the other notes there are defensive end. Well, you got a couple of true freshmen listed in the second string there as well. Jalen Brown and also Williams Nwaneri notable as well. Still not a ton of signs that Nwaneri is going to be a huge part of the Missouri defense at this point. I would expect really him to follow maybe more of the Aldon Smith type of career path in that, well, good God. Let's make it very clear what I mean by the Aldon Smith career path for Williams Nwaneri. I mean the early Aldon Smith career path there for Nwaneri, meaning basically this will probably be more or less a redshirt freshman year. It may not literally be a redshirt freshman year in Nwaneri's case, but I think year 2 in the program, just like year 2 in the program for Aldon Smith, his redshirt freshman year, suddenly he burst onto the scene and was a huge weapon as a pass rusher. I think you'll see that from Williams Nwaneri in 2025 as well. Though unlike Aldon Smith, again, because of the redshirt rules of today, I think you'll see him at least get some action and probably enough to burn that red shirt if I were a betting man. And all offseason, I've been guessing at what the running back usage was going to look like for the Tigers. I think Eli Drinkwitz gave us our first actual sense of clarity at the position, at least early in the season, and it's a little bit different than Eli Drinkwitz has traditionally played it. So let's talk about that coming up in just a second. First, though, I want to tell you that, hey, Locked On Mizzou fans, let's take a moment and talk about a brand new mobile game that you're going to absolutely love. It's called Ultimate College Football HC, an amazing simulation to get you to step into the shoes of the Missouri head football coach. Can you imagine how much fun it would be to be the Tigers coach? Recruiting players, hiring staff, overseeing training, handing out scholarships. You control every detail. It's really all in your hands. The question is, can you handle the pressure? And here's what I love about the game. You're responsible for calling offensive plays during the game, and that's really my bag. I'll be honest with you. X's and O's wise, just give me the offense. I like playing defense. Hey, I'll be your cover 3 linebacker, no problem. I'll be the single high safety, but all the nuance to me, more fun on the offensive side of the ball. So I think you're going to absolutely love Ultimate College Football HC. And, of course, we have a special offer for you Locked On Mizzou fans. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Make sure you take advantage of this perk, as it will get your team off to a strong start. Download the game. Just visit ultimate-cfb.com. That's ultimate-cfb.com. Or look it up in the app stores. Ultimate College Football HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. College football is back, and it's not too late to check out Locked On's previews of the SEC, ACC, Big Ten, and Big 12. It's all on the Locked On College Football feed on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get audio podcasts. These are just absolutely fantastic previews that I absolutely ate up. The ones outside of the SEC, I was there for the recording of that, but I just absolutely loved going and listening to the Big 10, Big 12, and ACC previews. And these have been so popular, guess what? I think we're going to start doing these weekly as well. So stay tuned for that. Missouri keeps winning. I'll definitely be a part of that. And this is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And as for our team, the Missouri Tigers, well, the running back position has been a bit of a curiosity this offseason, certainly. I think we mostly all expect it's going to be the 2 senior transfers, Nate Noel and Marcus Carroll. It's going to be the last time, I think, in Missouri history, you're going to see 2 guys who have actually played 4 years enter the program at running back with a 5th year to play. Goodbye, COVID. I can't believe we're going to actually finally get that nonsense in our rearview mirror, but I digress. The point here is that Eli Drinkwitz did give us a little bit of insight on how he at least plans to use these backs early in the season. Drinkwitz says Nate Noel will go out there first, and then he and Marcus will rotate through. I think those guys have good complementary football skills, and they know how to play off of each other. I think we understand we're probably going to have somebody that's going to be able to carry it as many times in the game as Cody. So we'll have to do a good job of making sure we allow the starter to get into a rhythm, but also make sure they're fresh. So again, just to recap there, Drinkwitz basically saying, hey, we don't think we'll have a Cody Schrader type of workload for any single back on this team. And like he says, from what I've seen from both of these guys, both of their films, from Nate Noel at App State and Marcus Carroll at Georgia State, I think Drinkwitz is correct that they have definitely some skills that are very complementary. Marcus is more of the, say, straight ahead, I would say, runner, more of a bruiser type of back who is going to be good in short yardage and in a box. When you need to run somebody over to get an extra yard or two, Marcus Carroll's probably your guy. Whereas Nate Noel, I'm not saying he can't get the extra yards, but he is more of a, at least based on the scheme that was run at App State, he is more of the outside zone type of runner that we saw a lot from Schrader last season. He is also a little bit quicker, again, according to Drinkwitz and most observers. And that's also, I would say, most importantly to me, he's a good pass receiver as well. that's something, if I'm going to play 2 running backs, I want at least one of those guys to be a really good pass receiver. So the fact that you got a guy who can be sort of your third down back and you've got your short yardage back, just to put them in sort of a box there, I think those are a really nice compliment. So it makes sense that it's not just going to be all or nothing at running back in this particular season. At least early, we'll see how it goes by October. By the way, if there were one guy who was going to take 90% of the carries and snaps at running back this season, well, you would actually probably assume that it was going to be Marcus Carroll, because at Georgia State last season, he actually led the nation in carries per game with nearly 23 per ball game. However, he seems fine with a less load, especially in the SEC schedule here. Carroll said it's definitely a plus to have somebody and not having to take all the load and stuff like that. As far as reps, it's a lot of experience for me, but having a deep running back room with a lot of experienced guys is definitely refreshing, is the word that Marcus Carroll left. So probably refreshing in multiple different ways for Carroll. It sounds like, again, 23 carries per game last season for Georgia State. That's tough at any level, but at the SEC level, that's really asking a lot. So it does make sense that Missouri isn't going to be throwing out that big of a load this time to any one player. Now, Eli Drinkwitz raised some eyebrows this weekend when he said that Murray State this season is going to be the toughest opponent that they've had to prepare for during his time with the Tigers. And of course, well, a lot of people immediately said, now, wait a second. Wasn't Drinkwitz's first season, 2020, the COVID season, where the Tigers opened up with Alabama, who eventually went 13-0, won the title, the whole deal? Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle, Najee Harris, Mac Jones, the whole crew. Did we just imagine that? Well, obviously, Drinkwitz didn't mean that Murray State is better than Alabama. I don't know why that really needed to be said, quite frankly. Because here's what Drinkwitz was talking about. He says there's really no way to watch Murray State film. They've got a brand new offense, defense, and special teams coordinator, along with 60 new players. So indeed, what are we going to learn from watching Murray State's film last season? What are we going to learn from even talking to Murray State's play-by-play coach or play-by-play man on the radio or something like that? He's probably a nice guy. My point is, how are we going to learn anything from him? He doesn't know what he's going to see out here. Now, obviously, Missouri is going to wax Missouri State. It's a 47.5-point spread the last time I checked over at FanDuel Sportsbook, and there's no chance the Tigers are going to lose this game. So I just thought it was kind of amusing that people thought that Eli Drinkwitz wasn't aware of this. I don't know. Clearly he was trying to make a point there. Maybe you think he was being a little hyperbolic, but the idea that he isn't aware that the 2020 Alabama Crimson Tide are better than the 2024 Murray State Racers, I think there was a lot of wasted ink on that particular topic. And with 4 relatively pedestrian home games to start off the Missouri season, 4 straight games at home for Missouri, a lot of season ticket holders are a little bit disappointed with the schedule this season. But I got to say, when you compare the football schedule at home to basketball, well, you're getting a heck of a lot better value on the gridiron than you're getting on the hardwood, to the point where if I'm in the athletic department, I've got to be a little bit concerned by that, at least if I care about my live attendance. And as time goes along here, you have to wonder how much live attendance really matters. Let's talk about all that coming up and compare this upcoming basketball schedule to this football schedule in just a little bit. First, as you all know, I am your man for Missouri Tigers football and basketball talk 5 days a week. But of course, every once in a while, my energy level is not quite as high as I'd like to be. Well, that's why I take a 5-hour energy. That fixes my tired problem very quickly. And 5-hour energy gives you a shot of that feeling of alertness and energy you need to get in the zone. Tired after lunch, well, you're not alone. In fact, research shows that more than 70% of us hit a wall after lunch. Well, let 5-hour energy help you leap over that wall instead of crashing into it. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5-hour energy product today. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. And I talked recently on an episode of Locked On Mizzou about the non-conference portion of Missouri's basketball season for this upcoming year. Let's get a little further into it. A couple notes. First of all, I thought it was interesting that Kentucky is Missouri's senior day this season. So Mark Pope, his squad, going to be facing Missouri at the very end of the season. I don't know if that's good or bad. Of course, back in the day, and by back in the day, I mean last season, when John Calipari was still around with Kentucky, the conventional wisdom is, hey, when Kentucky had a bunch of freshmen on the roster, better to play them early in the SEC slate in January versus later in, say, March. Whether that's the case with Mark Pope in his first year or not, well, we'll just have to see. But the Tigers also play Oklahoma twice, along with Arkansas and Vanderbilt in this 18-game SEC schedule. So, of course, for the past few years, Missouri has always played a home and away series with Arkansas in basketball. Usually it was Texas A&M and Ole Miss in the last few years, and more often than not, that have been the Tigers' other home and away opponents. This year, though, with the Sooners coming in from the Big 12, well, Missouri gets them twice, and also Vanderbilt twice as well. By the way, the Tigers will travel to Texas in January to meet up with the Longhorns again for a little Big 12 reunion. Ultimately, of course, you look at this schedule and you get 9 SEC games at home if you're a season ticket holder. And you'd also get 9 games that I would consider gimmies, including Howard, Eastern Washington, Mississippi Valley State, and the like. Those type of games. Games that, well, not a lot of real juice to them. So you're talking about 9 gimme games. Well, that's more games than you even have in the entire Missouri football schedule, for one. But on top of those 9 gimme non-conference games, you do have 2 premium ones, I would say, including the Cal Bears, of course, and most importantly, the Kansas Jayhawks at home. Obviously, that's a real benefit to your season ticket this coming season if you are indeed a Missouri season ticket holder. So how much the Kansas game means to you is probably the biggest value you have in your season ticket this season. But what about next season when there is no Kansas game on the schedule? What kind of value are you really getting when basically for 18, 19, 20 games, half of your games at home are pretty boring, are expected to be non-competitive? And if they're not, is anybody happy, for example, that they attended the Jackson State basketball game last year? Sure, it was competitive, but Missouri lost, and you were probably throwing up into your Toyota Camry on the way home, quite honestly. So again, more than half of your games are desirable. I would say 11 out of 20. Again, I'll give you all 9 SEC games, and I'll give you Cal, and I'll give you Kansas. But that's 11 out of 20. That's 55% of your season tickets are basically desirable games that your average fan might want to actually attend. Well, in football, let's compare it to that. I'll say Missouri's 2-2 there. I'll give you Boston College and Vanderbilt because I'm feeling generous. An SEC game is an SEC game, and an ACC opponent counts too. To me, anything in the major four conferences right now, I'll give you a win on that one scheduling-wise. Plus, then you have Auburn, Oklahoma, Arkansas, the Battle Line rivalry, the Ozark Bowl, as I prefer to call it. Well, all of those are worth it too. So now you're telling me 5 out of 7 for your season ticket. In football, that's 71% of your games are actually worth it. That's 71% versus 55% in basketball. So all you're getting in basketball, you're not getting better quality. You're just getting more quantity. That's really not great value, I have to say. The only thing is there's a real balance there, because if you're Dennis Gates, you're probably saying, hey, great, I don't care. I just want to rack up wins, make the NCAA tournament, and hopefully stay employed and keep cashing these checks at Missouri for a long time. Thank you very much. So my point is there definitely is a bit of a conflict here in terms of, if you want to just put people through the turnstiles, then you'd schedule the top 50 type of teams for your non-conference for every single game, if that were your goal. But of course, there's got to be a balance between that and actually trying to get to 20 wins, trying to get in to the NCAA tournament. And quite honestly, the way college basketball, and to a lesser extent college football, but especially college basketball, the way it works now is most of the money by far is coming through in terms of television revenue, especially with the March Madness contracts. So really, as long as ESPN and, all of these networks are happy with their television products, their streaming products that they have, that is college basketball, then that's great. So live attendance is really secondary. Mostly it's about atmosphere, really. The fuller the building is, the better the TV product is. So if you're Missouri, I think this is something Desiree Reed-Francois started to catch on to, and I hope the new administration with Laird Veatch continues this. But what you want to do, you don't need to worry about milking every single dollar of ticket revenue anymore. What you want to do is fill up the building as much as possible with real excitement, with a real full crowd that's going to translate to television, that's going to translate to recruits being interested in your product, fans being interested in your product, whether they go through the turnstiles or not. Because right now, the real money is in the TV dollars. There's no comparison. Don't get me wrong, you want to sell all the popcorn and beer and tickets you can, but on a simple accounting Excel spreadsheet, there's no doubt that it's all about the TV at this point. So the point is, if you're Missouri, if you're Eli Drinkwitz, you want to sell out Murray State, start offering some $5 tickets. I'm not saying give them away for free, but give them away for close to free. People respond to incentives. They respond to cheap tickets, and a $5 seat is still better than a $20 or $30 seat that's unsold. It looks better on television, and by the way, you can help create new fans in the future by getting some families and their young kids in there, make some memories, all that good stuff. To me, that's just obvious at this point. Stop worrying about today's dollar, today's penny, really, and worry about tomorrow's dollar. That would be my way of looking at it. But hey, thanks as always for listening to Locked On Mizzou. As always, I am John Miller, and this has been Locked On Mizzou.